The rain hammered against the windows of our small apartment in Seattle, mimicking the tempest brewing inside me. Alaric, a 44-year-old software engineer, found myself staring blankly at the glowing screen of my laptop, the lines of code blurring into meaningless symbols. My life, once a predictable and comforting sequence of routines, had been brutally upended. It all started subtly enough. Elara, my wife of 15 years, a vibrant and beloved kindergarten teacher, began acting distant. At first, I chalked it up to stress. The school year was always demanding, filled with energetic children and demanding parents. But the distance persisted, deepening into a chasm that seemed to widen with each passing day. Her laughter, once a constant melody in our home, became infrequent, replaced by a strained silence. She'd come home late from work, claiming extra hours grading papers or attending meetings, but her explanations sounded hollow, rehearsed. I noticed she'd started taking extra care with her appearance, buying new clothes, spending more time on her makeup. It was perplexing. Elara was the kind of woman who always looked effortlessly beautiful, but now it felt like she was trying too hard, as if she were trying to impress someone. One evening, I picked up Alara's phone to check the time, and I saw a message notification pop up on the screen. It was from a number I didn't recognize, simply saved as Leo, and the message read, "Thinking of you. Can't wait until tomorrow." A cold dread washed over me, a chilling premonition that something was terribly wrong. I tried to dismiss it, to tell myself it was just a harmless flirtation, a misunderstanding. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began to sprout, its tendrils wrapping tightly around my heart. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. I tossed and turned, replaying every interaction with Elara, searching for clues, for explanations. The next morning, I decided to do something I never thought I would do. I snooped. While Elara was in the shower, I quickly unlocked her phone using the password I knew by heart and scrolled through her messages with Leo. My blood ran cold as I read the exchange. It was blatant, explicit, undeniable. They were having an affair. The messages were filled with declarations of love, longing, and secret rendezvous. My hands trembled as I scrolled further, each message a fresh stab wound to my soul. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air in a sea of betrayal. I stumbled out of the bedroom, my head spinning, my stomach churning. How could she? How could Elara, the woman I loved, the woman I had built my life with, do this to me? The rest of the day was a blur. I went through the motions at work, barely able to focus on my tasks. My colleagues noticed my distress, asking if I was feeling all right, but I just mumbled vague excuses and retreated into my cubicle, trying to process the enormity of what I had discovered. I couldn't bring myself to confront Elara. I was afraid of what she would say, afraid of the lies, afraid of the truth. I spent the evening pacing our apartment, the rain outside mirroring the storm raging within me. When Elara finally came home, she seemed unusually cheerful, her eyes sparkling with an unfamiliar light. "Hey, honey," she said, kissing me on the cheek. "How was your day?" Her voice sounded so normal, so innocent, that it made my skin crawl. I wanted to scream, to shout, to accuse her of her treachery, but I couldn't. The words caught in my throat, choked by a mixture of anger, hurt, and disbelief. I simply mumbled a reply and retreated to the kitchen, busying myself with preparing dinner. Over dinner, I watched her, scrutinizing her every move, every expression. She seemed oblivious to my inner turmoil, chattering about her day at school, about the antics of her students. It was unbearable. I felt like I was living in a surreal nightmare, watching a play where I knew the ending but was powerless to change it. After dinner, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront her, to hear her explanation, to understand why. "Elara," I said, my voice trembling slightly, "we need to talk." She looked at me, her brow furrowed with concern. "What's wrong, Alaric? You seem upset." "Upset," I repeated, my voice rising. "Upset doesn't even begin to describe how I feel. I know about Leo." Her face paled and her eyes widened with a mixture of shock and fear. For a moment she was silent, her lips trembling, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Then she began to cry. "Alaric, I can explain," she stammered, her voice choked with sobs. "Explain," I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Explain how you've been betraying me for months. Explain how you've been lying to my face. Explain how you've been sleeping with another man." She continued to cry, her tears streaming down her face. "It just happened," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake." "A mistake," I repeated, my voice filled with disbelief. "A mistake that you've been repeating for months. A mistake that you've been hiding from me, lying about, sneaking around behind my back." She didn't answer, her head bowed in shame. I stood up, my legs shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt like I was going to explode. "I can't do this," I said, my voice cracking with emotion. "I can't stay here and listen to your lies. I need some time to think." I turned and walked out of the apartment, slamming the door behind me. I wandered aimlessly through the streets of Seattle, the rain washing over me, blurring my vision. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. All I knew was that my life had been shattered, my heart broken, and my trust betrayed. I spent the night in a cheap motel, unable to sleep, replaying the events of the day over and over in my mind. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare, unable to wake up. The next morning, I returned to the apartment, determined to confront Elara, to demand answers, to decide what to do next. When I walked in, I found her sitting on the couch, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked up at me, her expression pleading. "Alaric, please," she said, her voice trembling. "Let me explain. I know I've hurt you and I'm so sorry, but I still love you. I want to make things right." I looked at her, my heart aching with a mixture of love and anger. I wanted to believe her, to forgive her, to put this all behind us, but I couldn't. The trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. "I don't know if I can do that, Elara," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." She stood up and walked towards me, her hand reaching out to touch my face. I flinched, recoiling from her touch. "Please, Alaric," she said, her voice filled with desperation. "Don't give up on us. I know I've made a mistake, but I promise I'll never do it again. I'll do anything to earn your forgiveness." I looked into her eyes, searching for the truth, searching for a sign that she was truly remorseful, but all I saw was fear and a desperate desire to avoid the consequences of her actions. "I need some time, Elara," I said, my voice firm. "I need some time to think about what I want to do." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, her tears falling silently. I spent the next few days at a friend's house, trying to clear my head, trying to make sense of what had happened. I talked to my friend Rorik, pouring out my heart, sharing my pain, my anger, my confusion. Rorik listened patiently, offering words of support and encouragement. He had been through a similar experience himself, and his advice was invaluable. "You need to do what's best for you, Alaric," Rorik said. "Don't let her guilt you into staying in a relationship that's no longer healthy. You deserve to be with someone who loves you, who respects you, who is loyal to you." His words resonated with me. I knew he was right. I couldn't stay with Elara, not after what she had done. The trust was gone, and without trust, there was no foundation for a relationship. I decided to file for divorce. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, but I knew it was the right one. When I told Elara, she was devastated. She begged me to reconsider, promising to change, to be a better wife. I stood firm. My mind was made up. The divorce was finalized a few months later. It was a painful and difficult process, but I got through it with the support of my friends and family. Elara moved out of the apartment, and I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered life. I threw myself into my work, finding solace in the familiar routines and challenges. I started exercising, taking long walks in the park, and spending more time with my friends. Slowly but surely, I began to heal. One day, about a year after the divorce, I received a phone call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello," I said. "Alaric, it's Elara," the voice on the other end said. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't spoken to her since the divorce. "What do you want, Elara?" I asked, my voice cold. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice trembling. "Can we meet?" I hesitated for a moment, then agreed. We met at a small coffee shop near our old apartment. When I saw her, I was shocked. She looked pale and gaunt, her eyes hollow and lifeless. She had lost weight, and her clothes hung loosely on her frame. She looked like a shadow of her former self. "What happened to you, Elara?" I asked, my voice filled with concern. She looked down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting nervously. "Things didn't work out with Leo," she said, her voice barely audible. "He left me a few months after the divorce. He said he was never really in love with me, that he just wanted a fling." My heart ached for her despite everything she had done. I knew what it felt like to be betrayed, to be abandoned. "I'm sorry, Elara," I said, my voice sincere. "I know what that feels like." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "I made a mistake, Alaric," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I ruined everything. I lost you and I lost myself." I reached across the table and took her hand, my touch gentle and comforting. "It's okay, Elara," I said. "You can't change the past, but you can learn from it. You can rebuild your life and you can find happiness again." She squeezed my hand, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Alaric," she said. "You're a good man. I don't deserve you." We talked for a while longer, sharing our experiences, our regrets, our hopes for the future. It was a cathartic conversation, a way for us to finally put the past behind us and move on with our lives. As I left the coffee shop, I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in a long time. I had forgiven Elara not for her sake, but for my own. I had released the anger and resentment that had been poisoning my soul, and I was finally free to move forward, to find love and happiness again. A few years later, I met a wonderful woman named Bront. She was kind, intelligent, and beautiful, and she loved me for who I was. We got married and built a life together, filled with love, laughter, and mutual respect. I finally found the happiness that I had been searching for, the happiness that Elara had stolen from me. I never forgot about Elara, but I no longer felt any bitterness or resentment towards her. I hoped that she had found happiness as well, that she had learned from her mistakes and built a better life for herself. One day I received a letter from Elara. It was a simple note, thanking me for my kindness and forgiveness. She told me that she had found a new job, a new home, and a new sense of purpose. She had learned from her mistakes and she was finally happy. I smiled as I read her letter, my heart filled with joy. I was glad that she had found peace, that she had finally healed. My story is a cautionary tale, a reminder that betrayal can shatter even the strongest of relationships. But it is also a story of hope, a testament to the power of forgiveness, and a reminder that even after the darkest of times, it is possible to find love and happiness again. But then, a twist. A few weeks after our meeting, I received an anonymous email with an attachment. It was a series of bank statements, meticulously detailing Alara's finances. As I scrolled through the documents, my blood ran cold. It revealed a hidden account, one I had no knowledge of, brimming with a substantial sum of money. The deposits were frequent and regular, coinciding with the timeline of her affair with Leo. The source: a local real estate developer known for his shady dealings and questionable ethics. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The affair wasn't just about lust or boredom. It was calculated, premeditated, and driven by greed. Leo wasn't just a lover. He was a pawn in Alara's elaborate scheme. She had used him to gain access to the developer, to extract money from him under the guise of consulting fees or investment opportunities. My initial reaction was disbelief, followed by a surge of anger that threatened to consume me. I had forgiven her, offered her a second chance, only to discover that her betrayal ran far deeper than I could have ever imagined. The pain was different this time, less about heartbreak and more about utter disgust. I felt like I had been played, manipulated, and used in the most callous and calculating way possible. I decided to confront her one last time. I called her, my voice trembling with suppressed rage, and demanded to meet. She arrived at the coffee shop, her face etched with anxiety, sensing that something was amiss. "What's wrong, Alaric?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. I slid the bank statements across the table, the evidence of her treachery laid bare. Her eyes widened in horror as she recognized the documents. "Where did you get these?" she stammered, her voice filled with panic. "It doesn't matter," I said, my voice cold and hard. "What matters is that I know the truth. Your affair wasn't just a mistake. It was a calculated scheme to steal money from me." She tried to deny it, to lie her way out of it, but the evidence was overwhelming. I watched as her carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing the cold, calculating woman beneath. "I needed the money," she said, her voice filled with desperation. "I was in debt and Leo offered to help me. I didn't mean to hurt you." "You didn't mean to hurt me," I repeated, my voice laced with sarcasm. "You lied to me, you cheated on me, you stole from me, and you tell me you didn't mean to hurt me." I stood up, my hands clenched into fists, my body trembling with rage. "I can't believe I ever loved you," I said, my voice filled with disgust. "You're a monster." I turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there, her face buried in her hands, her body racked with sobs. This time I didn't feel any pity, any compassion. All I felt was a profound sense of relief that I had finally seen her for who she truly was. I contacted a lawyer and presented the evidence of her financial crimes. The lawyer was confident that we could pursue legal action, but I hesitated. I didn't want to spend years in court, reliving the pain and humiliation of her betrayal. I decided to take a different approach. I contacted the real estate developer, the source of Elara's ill-gotten gains. I presented him with the evidence of her scheme, along with a veiled threat to expose his involvement to the authorities. He panicked, offering me a substantial sum of money to keep quiet. I refused his offer, telling him that I wasn't interested in money. All I wanted was justice. I told him that if he didn't cooperate, I would expose his dealings to the media, ruining his reputation and his business. He reluctantly agreed to cooperate, providing me with evidence of Elara's involvement in other illegal activities. Armed with this new information, I contacted the authorities. Elara was arrested and charged with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. The trial was a media circus, with every detail of her betrayal splashed across the headlines. She tried to portray herself as a victim, claiming that she had been manipulated by Leo and the real estate developer. But the evidence was overwhelming, and she was found guilty on all counts. She was sentenced to several years in prison, her life in ruins. As I watched her being led away in handcuffs, I felt a sense of closure, a sense that justice had finally been served. I had lost my marriage, my trust, and my peace of mind, but I had also gained something, a newfound sense of strength and resilience. I had survived the betrayal, and I had emerged stronger and wiser. I continued to build my life, focusing on my career, my friends, and my family. I eventually found love again with a woman who was honest, loyal, and kind. We built a life together, based on trust, respect, and mutual support. I never forgot about Elara, but I no longer allowed her to define me. I had learned from my mistakes, and I had moved on with my life. My story is a reminder that betrayal can be devastating, but it doesn't have to be the end. It is possible to heal, to forgive, and to find happiness again. It is possible to emerge from the darkness stronger and wiser, ready to embrace a new chapter of life.